We are here today for a candid chat with Anshul Jain and Christopher Browne of Cushman and Wakefield. Anshul is Managing Director, India and Southeast Asia and at Cushman and Wakefield. And Christopher is Managing Director, Head of Global Occupier Services, Asia Pacific at Cushman and Wakefield. Today, we wish to explore their leadership style throughout this crisis, personal and professional journeys, and hobbies and their mentors. Welcome on board, Chris and Anshul. We are very happy to have you here on this panel today.
Nice to be here.
Thank you, Tushar.
Thank you. So, Anshul, before we move to our professional discussion, I would like to start with your, a little bit about your personal journey, and would like to know about your personal side. So, I heard that you started your career, selling the finances, selling the, insurances at Oneida Finance, and now today you are managing director for Cushman and Wakefield, and you are not only handling India, you are handling several other countries. So, Anshul, if I ask you to flashback in your life and give us little, touch points of your journey, where we can also get inspiration, would you like to share your journey with us?
Yeah, looking back, things seems pretty easy. And as Steve Jobs said, dots only connect when you look back, right? They never connect looking forward. So Oneida Finance was interesting. It was hardly 6 months of my first 6 months of my career. And since then, I've already been in the real estate services industry or the IPC industry across the world. Now, the transition was actually very interesting. And, I don't think I've shared this story much before. But effectively, I was selling fixed deposits and other financial projects door to door for Oneida Finance. And I actually happened to knock the door of this company which had a very small but a very smart office. And for those of you who are in Delhi, know how hot it can be in Delhi, going on, doing sales on effectively going to knocking door to door. So what really drove me into choosing this company really was a very chic office and a nice air-conditioned, comfortable environment. And of course, this company was Richard Ellis. It was called Richard Ellis at the time, of course, now CBRE. I was the 13th employee of CBRE India. And that's where really my journey started in real estate services. And then, through the next 10 or 12 years, I progressed my career, spent some time in India. Then I landed up in Indonesia because really my wife landed up a pretty good job in Indonesia. And I said, hey, that's great. It's a great time for me to sort of try and step out of India. And remember, 98 was very difficult to step out of India at that point in time in the 90s. So got that opportunity, went there, landed up a job with a company called Procon India, which was JLL's subsidiary or affiliate in Indonesia. Spent a year there. Another crisis happened there, which was the tiger crisis and the Asian tiger crisis, which I talked separately about. Came back to India for a while, but really the aspirations was to, stay overseas and move overseas as soon as the environment became stable. Knocked on a few doors in Singapore, got back to Singapore, pursued my MBA after that from Switzerland, landed up in London, and all this while just really following my wife actually, because she was the one who went to Singapore from Indonesia, and then she was the one who moved to London. I just happened to follow, and with God's grace, I think the real estate services business was really growing across the world, and I kept getting those opportunities. And then it was finally in 2008, at the time of global finance crisis, funnily enough, that DTZ at the time was looking for someone to head up the company in India, and I was working for DTZ in London, which is when I moved back. And then, of course, in India, I've spent now last 12 years, firstly with DTZ, and DTZ obviously merged with Cushman's, then with Cushman's for the last sort of 4 years. And now taken on this larger responsibility only this year, expanding from India into Southeast Asia. So yes, what started with I guess spur of the moment opportunity which I grabbed on, and then kept looking at opportunities. I just like to point a difference to say it was looking at the opportunities of growth and not being opportunistic. Because I think the opportunistic becomes slightly negative. That really helped me through the career, and I am where I am. It's a series of events and dots which connected.
Yeah, thanks, Anshul. Before I go to Chris, you have spoken about many crises in your life. I think the Tiger economic crisis, or maybe the dot-com burst, or maybe the global finances crisis in 2008-10. What is how you feel like this COVID crisis is different from the other crises? Like what you have gained or lost for these crises. Like, so you have just started this topic, so I thought like I should start with that.
Yeah, why not? I mean, every crisis is very interesting, right? But I feel that increasingly every next crisis hits the world more and more collectively. So if you look at the Asian economic crisis, it was a bunch of 4 or 5 countries in Asia which were the epicenter, right? I mean, and it had ripple effects around the world, but the epicenter was that, right? And .com had another ripple which affected certain industries, and then 9/11 happened on top. The GFC had a much wider reach, but still emerging markets were not that badly hit around GFC. I mean, they were hit for some time. So, for example, India, most of the people did not feel a massive pinch coming out of GFC. But this particular crisis, I think, is truly global. It's just absolutely, I think no one country is spared out of it, and there is there's no single solution that's coming out of it. Politicians have not dealt with a crisis like this. Businesses have not dealt with crisis like this, and therefore, while people are trying to throw tons of money onto this crisis, right? In GFC, what took about 3 years for governments to decide. I think in the first 3 or 4 months of this crisis, the governments put out more money than they put out in the entire GFC. Yep. So this crisis is very different, and I'm not sure if COVID will be over in the next 6, 9, 12 months. I think the way we come out of it will be very, very different, and it will fundamentally change the world in terms of how we live, work, shop, and coexist, and that's a very fundamental change.
Yeah, I think Anshul raises a really good point on the difference of these crises and how much more complex and global they become. And you learn something different with each, right? So a crisis that didn't happen that a lot of people expected was Y2K, where the computer programming only showed years as 2 digits. So the concern was, does everything go back to 1900 when 2000 hits? And what that crisis that didn't happen did was taught people a lot of planning, a lot of, business continuity planning and getting ready. And I think when you take the GFC and the Asian, economic challenge and some of the others, they taught you how to respond. And so I think what's different about COVID, besides the uncertainty of it, I think people were quicker to get into their crisis management and business continuity, and they were quicker to make the financial decisions, just like Anshul said, whether it's governments putting money in or companies making a lot of quick short-term actions to start mitigating the effects. So I think, while it's different and new, I think companies and people are getting a lot smarter, knowing how to combine their experience from the prior events to move quicker in response.
Great point.
Yeah. So Chris, thank you. Like before I come to your personal journey, I want to ask you one thing. Like if you look at the other crises, like even like 2010, the media was strong, but the internet was not so fast. So like we were not so connected on mobile or WhatsApp or. In my view, like I would like to ask you one thing, that how this connectivity has changed the experience of this crisis, because I was not so much of that kind of leadership role, so which I can feel, but I think you guys were leading that time also, you guys are leading today also. So this connectivity, how changed the experience of the crisis? Anshul, can you just tell me something about this?
I think sometimes data and knowledge is helpful, sometimes it's not. Obviously, in an era of, free flow of information, knowledge, what's fake, what's not fake, people reacting differently, and that is exactly what we are seeing across the world with governments, with businesses, and in everybody in their own circle of WhatsApp friends, and everybody's drawing conclusions based on something that they're reading, and whether that's right or wrong. But what certainly this has done is it's created a strong, I suppose, almost a fear factor. And because the information goes fast so quick, it's almost impossible to have a concise almost difficult to have a direction as to where we are heading, because everybody, it's like one large democracy where everybody has their mind and they're heading in different directions. And that is, I think, what the social media has managed to create.
Yeah, I think that's a really, really important observation, because as a company, we've had to adapt. You don't have as much time to analyze, decide, and then communicate. So you're having to respond much more quickly. And I think the biggest pivot we as a company took was more of an agile approach, right? So we knew we couldn't answer everything, so we would move things quickly, putting together committees around the globe, having conversations daily, and literally every day or two, more direction, more clarity was coming. And if we didn't have the answer, we'd say we're still working on that one. But it changed the speed of communication. And so you can use our own internal forms of social media, whether it's through things like Microsoft Teams and everything else, and the other forms of communication for the good. I think the challenge is everybody's responding to the amount of information out there, and much of that is misinformation. But I think a big lesson that we've picked up is, communicating as you go is what most people actually want to hear. They don't expect you to have the full answer yet. And I think that's been a really positive lesson through this.
Yeah. So Chris, I would like to ask you, you've been into international career for almost 20 years. Like, what is your milestones? What is your journey? How you started working with Cushman and Wakefield? If you give a little bit story about your life or career, it will be great to hear from a...
Sure.
Yeah.
And I think mine in many ways, has similarities to Anshul. And I think that's probably common for most people, in that you don't necessarily know where you're going to end up or how you're going to get there, but you're opportunistic as things come along. And so, I was born and raised in Chicago, had never moved out of the area. At least I had a passport. Many Americans don't. So I'd done a little bit of travel. But my first move was down to Atlanta in the late 1990s. It was actually in 1998. It was only a few years later, though, I was at an awards conference because I had had some really good performance. I was one of 50 people out of the entire company. And it was in September of 2001. And the first big night, kind of the big celebration night, and everybody's having a good time, my boss pulls me aside and said, "Hey, we want to expand our operations in New York and grow the client base. And you've done great in Atlanta. Would you consider going to New York?" And I'm one who really likes a challenge. And as the Frank Sinatra song says, if I can make it there, I can make it anywhere. And so I said, sure, absolutely. That was on September 9th of 2001. So we're still at the conference, and we wake up in the morning on September 11th. And so, obviously, an event that nobody ever anticipated, nobody knew how to process. Nonetheless, I still took the opportunity, and I thought no better time to go into a market that is now in a turbulent, chaotic way, and show the commitment into it. That really, accelerated my career. So that was the first major milestone, because after having success there, it opened up the door to many. The second opportunity came in 2006. I had actually just left the company I'd been with to a competitor. And it was for a major step change up in a role. And I had the opportunity to take a global role from a regional role. And within that, they asked me to move to London. What was tough about it, though, is it was during the summer, and it was a very short time fuse. So they gave us about a month to say, can you do it? And let's start planning it. Well, my kids, who are ages 12 and 14, so really critical stages, one in middle school, one getting ready to start their high school years, were away at camp as junior camp counselors. So we made the decision without even talking to the kids. They come home, and they've got a week basically to process we're moving to London at a really important time in their life. So basically they both said I ruined their life. So I go to London, have this great experience of working cross-culturally, for the first time really having to understand how do you work with people who are different. And going in, I was thinking, okay, everybody's going to point out all the challenges, all the differences. And I went in with a mindset, I'm going to talk about what's in common. Because if you and I share something in common, we can work to make it better, versus if we spend all our time arguing about why it's different. And so that 2 years there really got me into a very different mindset of cross-cultural work, how to build from common versus arguing about what's different. At the end of the 2 years, I tell the kids it's time to go home. They told me I ruined their life again because they didn't want to go back. So with kids, it's a tough journey. And I think my last milestone would have been in 2015, or 2016 rather. I was at Cushman for only about 8 months, and the person we were pursuing for the role I'm in right now initially had said yes, but then just declined over the weekend, got cold feet and said, I don't want to make the change from where I'm at. So I literally walked into the office that Monday morning to my boss and I said, hey, do you have a plan B for how to fill the role in Asia? And he goes, no, we don't. I said, well, I would do it. I said, I know I'm only here 8 months. I like the job I'm doing, so I have no problem staying and I'm committed, but you tell me where you need me to go and what's the highest and best use. And so he said, Asia's the bigger need. It's a growth opportunity. We need the leadership there. We need to globalize even faster. And so that put me on my journey here. So 3.5 years in, it's fantastic. And so my lesson on all this is, be opportunistic. When the moment's there and you think it's a good move, it may stress you out with family and all that, but take the leap. And next thing you know, you've built a wonderful career in great locations or great roles.
Yeah, I think I totally agree with you. The growth, the growth mindset always be opportunistic, and they don't, I think they don't bind themselves in geographies or kind of regional territories. And I think it's a great learning point from a event to become a managing director for Krista, the Cushman and Wakefield. So I think it's a good point to know about you, Chris. And
no, absolutely. I think Tushar, I just want to say. There's so many people who work for us, and a lot of times people come to me and say, hey, what's next for me? And I said, be ready to travel, relocate. But I must say, I get slightly disappointed because 99% of the people today, for some reason, at least that's been my experience, they do not want to travel. They do not want to relocate. Sorry, they want to travel, but they don't want to relocate. And I think for the young people out there, that's the number one mistake. That's the biggest mistake you can do with your career.
So I think I read somewhere, I think there's Tim or maybe somebody else said from Apple that, a great opportunist or great leader are like a good backpacker. They don't think like, what is the time, what is the area, what is the, they are always ready with their travel plan. So I think it's a great thing to learn from you, Chris. Chris, like before I go to Anshul, I wanted to check, like, what is your mental strength or inspiration? Like I got one thing very right from you, that you are mentally, some ideas you have always in your mind, So what is your mental strength? What is your, inspiration?
It's interesting. I kind of think about this one in two ways. One, I think about the source of it. And so much of my inspiration came from my father. He was really tough to grow up under, very high expectations, very high demands, whether it was academics, whether it was behavior, anything. You were expected to be at your best. And he had this saying, which is good enough isn't good enough, right? So you're always being measured against a high bar. But what I really gained from him was he was so deep in his value system. Integrity and honesty led everything. So you never attempted to lie. You never attempted to do something, disingenuous. And I've always carried that with me. And so, for me, a lot of that strength comes from really trusting those values. And then that widens because as you start working with other people and you have relationships that are based on trust and honesty, and you're underpinned by really strong values, that's what's really kind of let me focus on my career, make the best decisions, and really advance forward. And in many ways, it almost insulates you sometimes from politics and other dynamics that can happen in organizations because you're doing the right thing for the right reason. And so that's always been my strong guiding post.
So I was interviewing Professor Bill George 3-4 days back, and he's like known for his authentic leadership, Anshul, and I think I've spoken about that. I think this is one thing, like values are values, you learn from your father or from your professor, but if you follow that, you have a path to go forward. So before so what are hobbies you follow, Chris, and what kind of how you de-stress yourself?
Yeah,
and
so
right now I think it is a very relevant question because every day we need to de-stress ourselves.
I think it's even more so now, right? Because so many of us have been trapped inside. In Singapore, we've been inside for 3 months, and so you limited, go out. For me, though, there's kind of two forms. You have the physical and you have the mental. And so my number one choice is to play tennis because it's a bit of both. So the game is physical, the opponent is a one-on-one match, so it's mental and also is competitive. And so that's my go-to place because it really helps in the stress relief. Plus you get the social bonding afterward, and we almost always, everybody brings their 2 beers and you sit around, you talk about the match, you have your 2 beers and you go home. In Singapore though, it rains a lot. So while it's always warm enough to play, with the rain, you have to have a couple others. So I definitely am a movie buff. I love the Marvel kind of movies. They're great. And when I'm more cerebral, I love doing crossword puzzles. For whatever reason, that combination of things, my brain is just somewhere else, and that's allowing it to recharge. So that's how I de-stress.
So Anshul, I know that you don't follow mentors. We have a kind of opposite thought process. But what is your inspiration? What is your kind of anything which you follow? And
I think a lot of my inspiration just comes from my own belief of I've got to keep moving forward, right? And it's a very intense, very deep rooted feeling somewhere that if I'm not moving forward in my career or forget career, in anything in my life, right? So it's like what's next, right? And funnily enough, what's next is Cushman Wakefield's tagline. So I believe in it very deeply to say, what is next for me? Maybe it's tomorrow, maybe it's day after. And when I say tomorrow and day after, it's not the 24-hour cycle. It's proverbially saying, what is it that I'm, and that really continues to drive me and inspire me somewhere. And as far as you said that, yes, we have an opposing view on mentors, and I'm not against mentors, right? You can, but what I want is to really learn from everyone's experience, right? So, Tushar, when I speak to you for half an hour, I do get lots of nuggets from you as to how you were thinking, right? So, people, and there are tons of people out there like you who I like, who I like to talk to, and without you knowing, I'm kind of absorbing a lot of things. So for me, what's very important is to be open to learning, to be modifiable. There's a term that we used in our organizational behavior class to say your personality should be open and modifiable. And
I think that's a good point, Anshul. Yeah, I don't have a direct mentor, and I've never really used mentors, but I'm very much the same as you've described. As I meet somebody, there's always something to be gained in the relationship that you build, always something to be learned. And I think that whole idea of being modifiable, listening skills, seeing a different point of view, all that is a great benefit. So mentors serve a strong purpose for many, but you can also get the same kind of wealth of information just through other interactions with people.
So generally have a multiple kind of go-to people, and people who inspire me could be much bigger, right? So for example, and this is controversial, I know in India, but Mahatma Gandhi inspires me. Lee Kuan Yew of Singapore inspires me. Now those are two very, very different personalities, but they're two different things to learn from people like that. Obama inspires me, right? And then from a go-to person, there are lots of friends that you can go to gain a specific activity or a specific understanding of a specific issue and some advice. So that's how I operate it, and I think this operates in a very similar way.
So I think as I both of you agree that a dynamic mentorship is required, the need of the hour today. Like so today, if I speak to you, I can learn from you. Tomorrow, I speak to Chris, or maybe my junior, or my senior. I think it's a dynamic mentorship is required. And the word is very dynamic. This word is not as like 10 years before when you are learning something and it is not revived. Today, every learning is revived in next half an hour. So.
Tushar, this may seem very preachy, but it's an age-old proverb which says change is the only constant. And as long as your personality is open for the change, I think anybody will do fine. And that is more relevant in today's business and today's life than ever it was.
Yeah, I think so. And when you look at it, 20, 30 years ago, companies took a lot of time to develop people in a very structured way to fit the style of their leadership and ultimately get up to the boardroom. Companies move much too quick now. So the dynamic concept of mentoring, I think, has far more value than an established, long, structured approach to mentoring and development. I think you've got to take advantage of the many people.
So I just wanted to request to all the audience that please post your questions in the Q&A box, and a lot of Cushman and Wakefield people are here. Please don't hesitate. Anshul and Chris is not boss today. They are not doing any Cushman and Wakefield town hall. They are talking like a leader, and they will give you a straightforward answer. So you please don't hesitate and pose the questions to me. I will ask Anshul and Chris what they are planning, what they are feeling, and what they are doing to manage this crisis. Before Anshul, what is your hobbies? What is your hobbies like, and how you de-stress yourself?
So, well, much like Chris, I have been playing tennis since my school days. I'm finding, and I'm a fairly aggressive tennis player. So what I'm finding these days for the last few years, actually, as I'm kind of getting into my late 40s, is that I play very aggressive tennis for a couple of months, and I manage to pull something, or there's an ache or a pain which just stays, and then I have to give it a break for 2 or 3 months. I've picked up golf a few years ago, so that occupies me. And the COVID crisis actually started, I would say, a new hobby, but a new way of de-stress, which everybody has been talking to me for a long time, and I never believed in this, is really meditation. So I started off on my kind of, let's say, spiritual meditation journey, I think around, I would say, 24th or 25th of March. And I thought I'd just give it a shot. A couple of us, got together every evening, 6:30, just neighbors. And you know what? It's kind of looks like it's staying with me, and I'm advancing. I'm pretty happy with that. And meditation or chanting. So that's something which I think is at least helping me mentally.
So Anshul, I didn't realize you were a tennis player. So when you get to Singapore, I play tennis much better than I play golf. So let's have a match that way. You've seen my golf. That's not where you want to have me spend time.
Yeah, Chris, when Chris and I played golf last, he put 25 brand new Cushman Wakefield balls into the lake.
It's advertising. It was advertising for other club members.
So let me set up a Zoom tennis match for both of you, okay? And let's have a tennis match on the Zoom. Because these days, physical events and activities are too much, like banned. And so, Anshul, before I move with my next question, I want to ask you, what has been your emotional journey in the last 3 months? You are responsible for 4,000 people, India or other countries. You're a large team sitting ideal at home, and people are looking at that what's gonna be the future. Families looking at you continuously 24/7 at home, and there are leaders have a lot of things to act on. So what kind of effects came on your personality? What was your feeling? What was your emotional journey?
I think it was a lot of roller coaster, I would say. At times you're unsure of what's happening. Things are changing on a daily basis. There is fear because there's that fear of the unknown. Then you've got to have your, what is the decisions that you take? Once you have a set of data, taking decisions is easy. Here, you don't have a set of data because things are changing, right? There is the human element of it, which is obviously extremely important. There were lots of questions around when I was doing almost a bi-weekly, a fortnightly town hall with the entire Cushman team. And there were tons of questions in the first part about jobs, about job security, questions I could not really answer because I did not know. But I think what I made very clear to people was what's the intention. And I think we've tried to live up to that as much as possible. And the intention that we had was that we are all in it together. So as far as possible, we'll share the pain and save as many jobs as possible, right? Ultimately, we are all in business. And the reality of it is that sometimes you've got to make a hard decision where you've got to protect the larger business. But I think our intention has been and will continue to be is to save, is to have collective pain as much as possible, right? So that's one part from a business perspective. So as I said, fear, anxiety, at times exuberance, because even in those times there were some fantastic stories coming out of the business. There have been people, particularly in IFM teams, they were on the front line, so as to say, when all of us were worried about Corona and sitting inside homes, they were out there serving the clients. I think there's some fantastic stories coming out. Technology was playing a big role in closing transactions. We actually closed a few transactions online, including these signed with digital signature. So lots of good stories coming out as well. HR started online engagement, and we had what we generally used to have these sort of happy Fridays, and we would have thank God it's Friday kind of events. Converted that into online, so lots of good stories. Personally, I think it was first to get kids adapted to the whole schooling through technology. Four of us working in homes, so we all had to find our own corners, and typically it was me or my wife who had to compromise and sit out in the lounge because the kids wouldn't want to. So a lot of that adjustment, and the fun part was obviously a lot more connecting with kids. I used to travel like 3 days a week, and then the other part which I think I enjoyed, and I saw a cartoon in the middle of the crisis, about 30-40 days later, which said that there's a massive queue, and basically it said this is the queuing up for MasterChef. And I think I could be part of that queue because I cooked probably 80 out of 90 dinners in the last 3 months. So dinner was my responsibility, and I cooked.
Chris, we should visit Anshul's home soon.
Yeah, I've had one meal there already. It's outstanding cooking. Between he and his wife, they do quite well.
Great. Yeah. So Anshul, again, I'm asking the question, like you are responsible for 4,000 employees. There will be a lot of instances you have to fire some people. I don't know. You had to deduct the salaries, or maybe some tough questions. As a leader, what was your emotional journey? How you communicated that to your people? How you kept motivated your people? It's like a large team. Project managers are asking that there is no side. How to keep your mental balance? The bookers, those who are not getting the right business they were earlier getting, cracking so much of business. How was your journey in those moments?
I think the journey is still continuing, Tushar, and those were in different phases, honestly, right? So the first phase was, let's not react and start in the first month, right? Let's see where this is going. Although the preparations were on because we didn't know, and you had to react quickly. But still there was a human element, and kudos to our Asia Pacific leadership team. We did say that while we are ready, we don't want to go deep or immediately on 15th of March, right? So you got to kind of have a look, right? And then I think May, June was about collective pain, as I said, and even in that we said we want to get consent, and I'm telling you, we got about 98% people sign that consent. To share some pain in terms of reduction of salaries, 98%, and we were very clear, we will not push, we will not coerce. Obviously you will coach, you will explain the rationale, and that's how we approached it. And going forward as well, I think depending on how long and how deep this goes, we'll probably have to continue to make tougher decisions. But as long as people understand the rationale, at the end of the day, it's business. It's you can only do as much. And at the end of the day, whatever we are doing, we're doing to protect the platform and not make irrational profits, right? I mean, those are two very different things. So while these things can be emotionally hard, I think proper communication and making sure that people understand the rationale, having a human element to it, doing things in phases so people know, and its response to the market. So I think that's been my journey so far.
Yeah, I think this is the best time to, crisis is the time where leaders, are either born as a leader or behave as a leader or maybe manage as a leader. So I think well said, Anshul. Chris, what is your global perspective? How you are feeling and how emotionally charged or discharged you are in this condition? What is the behavior you are seeing in Singapore or in other part of the world?
It's interesting because what Anshul's described, is in some form everywhere, right? Different markets may have different labor laws, which, give you different levers or not to pull. But I think it starts out, and I think the company's done really well, that number one is the employee safety. And so very quickly, all our response was, what are we doing to make sure our employees are safe? Very quickly, then it's what's the continuity for our clients and how do we balance our employee safety with servicing our clients, especially when we're doing some of the site level work where they're still out and having to engage. Then as business leaders, at the same time, you're looking at the economics of what's happening and how do you manage through that? How do you take a look at what revenues might be changing and how that's going to affect your costs, and so you make decisions. I think Anshul hit the nail on the head really well when he said it's this blend of really making sure people understand the rationale, and you've got to be able to have them understand what's happening. I really like the phased approach. So as Anshul's done it in India, we've done it across Asia, we've done it across the company, is we've thought about it in kind of 2-month increments in many ways, because that's as much information as we have. And I think that gives people time to prepare and adjust. They understand, they're hearing more what's happening in the markets. All of a sudden, we're not being very different necessarily, but we might be better communicating and more rational as we work our way through it. When other companies are doing massive layoffs or wholesale cuts, and they're doing it through the end of the year, our employees realize that we are listening, we are sensitive, and we're trying to balance what we have to do for our shareholders with them. And I think on my individual level, so much of it really comes back to taking the time to listen to people. There's been some really nice positives that have come out of this, which is that time with family, the flexibility, our ability to work as a team on remote bases. And those are some of the things we'll incorporate. But at the same time, people are learning that the world in business sometimes can be really tough, and it's not just a given. And so I find that the approaches are similar across Cushman and Wakefield around the globe. The variations usually driven by either the local economic performance, because some markets aren't hit as hard, or labor restrictions on the other side. But leading with empathy and understanding and being very clear as you communicate is the key to manage your way through it.
I think, Chris, like as you rightly said, I've done many webinars and I've done a lot of discussions. Empathy is one thing which is working, I think, most important part of our life right now. And I think another is evidence, you rightly said. And one thing, Anshul, which I totally agree with Chris, crowdsourcing ideas from your team. Like you have a large 4,000 people team. If there are many intelligent people in our teams, like when we do, town hall or, something, and you crowdsource ideas, sometimes you get very intelligent ideas. And I have similar experience, but we'll discuss that later. Manvind from PTI, he's a journalist and he's asking a very simple question to you, Anshul, that what is the impact of COVID on organized property consultancy business and how Cushman Wakefield is dealing with the problem? Any job losses or pay cuts in India business? So I think the last question you have already given the answer, but how you are managing this organized property consultancy business in this tough time?
So the organized property consulting is, if anything, the businesses are going to mature further, right? Because I think when we think about international property consultants, we think mostly around, brokerage businesses, right? But I think the reality is that the clients today are a lot more sophisticated, already were before COVID, and their requirement is much more integrated across the spectrum of real estate, right? So, for example, facility management has become exceptionally complicated as a service line, right? Projects, Tushar, you are in design and build business. You know how the designs have moved and how the whole thinking around work and people is getting integrated into designs. It's a human element and the business element combining, right? And that's going to change again very significantly. And then even from a leasing perspective, how the buildings are used, right? How they were being used before COVID, how they will be used after COVID. What impact does it have on the design of the building, the kind of leases people will sign, and so on and so forth. So the entire science, I think, around commercial office transactions, projects, FM, just the office component is exceptionally complicated, and I think that will really, probably drive more need for an advisory-based business, such as what the international consultants bring in. So absolutely. In terms of the second question, in terms of specific job losses, etc., or pay cuts, look, I obviously we can't talk about what we are doing in specific, but suffice to say that the entire industry, whether it's real estate industry or companies across, have cost rationalized or will cost rationalize, in the medium term or in the short term. So there's no way that anybody can escape that. It could be a month early or a month later. But that's part of our role as leaders and part of what every company is doing to make sure. And as I said, we believe in collective pain more than anything else.
Yeah, so I think Manvendra has again thrown a question. What is the outlook for office space demand and rentals for 2020 calendar? So I think this question is coming from many sources. And so you can give some data points. What do you feel will be, yeah.
Look, short term, and I've said this before. First of all, let me kind of put a different spin to this, and I'll answer this question, right?
Yeah.
So there's nothing in India which changes in the medium run, right? So, for example, I think our fundamentals are still in place. The factor advantages are there in terms of a young working population, English speaking. On top of it, the skill sets has been increasing very significantly, right?
Yep.
The factor advantage of cost that India had has actually gone up significantly. Why is that? Because I think chances are that by 2021 or even by 2022, we'll be on 2019 wages, right? Because there's been no wage growth this year. If anything, there's been wage deflation this year, which is 2020. 2021, we might have increments, we may not have increments depending on how the industry does, right? And when I say industry, it's just not real estate. I'm talking about the BPO sector and so on and so forth, right? So by end of 2021 or 2022, your wages would be on 2019 basis, right? Your real estate rentals now is very different from the GFC situation where the supply outstripped demand. We were in oversupplied situation. Right now, we are not in oversupplied situation. Having said that, there will be short-term softness in the market, and I think the rentals may come down in pockets between 5 and 10%, right? So think about if I'm a BPO, I'm saying, in 21 or 22, my wages are 2019. So in real terms, there's a big saving. My rentals are 5 to 10% less, right? And the dollar has appreciated by 10% on top, right? So my cost advantage for India becomes huge, right? And then if you look at some of the structural, change, ultimately GST is settling in, and that's RERA, and the other, India got $49 billion in FDI. So I think medium run prospect for India remains very strong, right? What will happen in 2020? Clearly, this is a year of crisis, right? So, and don't forget, we're coming off 2019, which was a massively good year for commercial real estate. That was the best year ever with 67 million square foot of gross absorption, 45 of net absorption. We are not going to see anywhere close to that, right? And it looks worse because you're coming off a very, very, very good year. It's kind of hard to predict, but I think maybe this year your net absorption would be in the region of 25 million square foot. It all depends on what happens in the third quarter and the fourth quarter and how quickly COVID disappears. But as I said, if I'm a institutional developer or owner, I would not be worried about 2020 numbers, right? What I've got to watch is all the fundamentals I just spoke about, and how will that support the growth of office market, and that remains very strong.
Yeah, I think if I build on it, I work with the multinational companies, and most of the clients are Western multinationals, and they all have a presence in India. And I think with the cost pressures they're facing as companies, they're looking for alternate solutions. And with the quality of the talent and the amount of talent in India, as well as the constantly improving infrastructures, I can see that this helps mitigate some of the other financial impacts on the real estate, because they'll start shifting their strategy, and I see key markets like India being a beneficiary. So I'm with Anshul. I think it's a smaller blip with a solid mid to long term view.
So Anshul and Chris, I understand that there is no point of worry. We should be calm, and we should be just going forward what the flow is going. But Chris, I have one story to share. Like, I was talking to one of my clients. I was doing around 10,000 square feet of project in Bangalore. And some other day he called me. When he called me, I was like worried. Oh my God, he's going to cancel the project. That was the first reaction I have in my mind. But fortunately, he called me to say that, Tushar, because, I don't know, you can both correct me if I'm wrong, that we are outsourcing business in India will be increasing now because the manpower, labor, infrastructure is very costly in US. There is so much uncertainty. We want to increase to 10,000 to 25,000. Okay? So please hold on. We want to increase the area. And let's do the design revision. That is one instant. The another instant, Anshul, the common client which we both serve, they are discussing with me that earlier we were doing 50,000 square feet, Tushar. Now we want to do 85,000. Again, ray of hope. So and I asked the same question, and the same answer I received, that because the global outsourcing teams will be looking at India now, because there are like China and other countries are not the destination. So I feel as a India going to be a good market for a lot of companies. Like I'm not going very hypothetical about the Chinese the companies shifting base from China. Fortunately, I spoke to those companies also. That will take around 3 to 5 years of span to shift from China to India. It is not that Lego box that which you pick up and then place in India. But fundamentally, I think I see a ray of hopes that many further development will happen. But I think we have to wait 2-3 months. But one thing, Anshul, I saw a lot of productized services coming from you, barometer, or maybe some aspects. So, do you think this consultancy business can be productized somewhere?
Yes, absolutely. Because I think ultimately, I think there's a mix, to be honest. So there is, the productization always happens from time to time, right? Depending on what the environment is. So at that particular time of environment, you create a product, right? So for example, right now we have the recovery readiness product or return to work product through 6 feet offices, which we pioneered across the world and became really, really popular, right? So that's a consulting product. So I think the products is always is a fast way to get to the market and help and advise clients. But the shelf life of that product may not be very long, because it's trying to advise client on a particular trend at that point in time, right? And then there is the other whole consulting element, which is gonna, I'd say, business.
So again, Anshul, I want to ask you that how your understanding and readings about the future of work, how this is changing, how commercial real estate is changing in India, and I think Chris can take over from the global perspective. What is your thoughts about it, Anshul?
Yeah, and maybe I can touch a little bit on work from home and this whole work from home conundrum. The only risk, if I talk about that, is a lot of times when you go to a doctor and the doctor says, well, you got to have this test, and the typical reaction is, oh, the guy, this is his profession, the guy's trying to make money, and that's why he got in the test, right? So I say this with that kind of caveat, but I actually think that the demand for office space, once the whole thing settles down, could actually increase, right? And I'm actually putting my neck out there when I say this, right? And I think there's lots of considered reason for that, right? So one, if you look, and I'm talking about India, right? So one, if you look at India, we were squeezing in more and more people in the square footage we had, right? So about 5-7 years, 10 years ago, we were talking about 100 square foot to 120 square foot per person, and most of the companies today were talking between 60 to 80 square foot per person, depending on who you were. Massive. Obviously putting massive number of people in that space. Now that's going to change, right? The companies will give more flexibility to employees. So certainly there'll be a move towards work from home, but that flexibility would be perhaps maybe to the tune of 20%. Maybe those two aspects that I just spoke about will offset itself. But work from home is very difficult in particularly South Asian businesses. Now picture the scenario, right? You've got millennials, you've got average age of people working in the companies 27, 28. They're either living with their parents or living with their friends. The friends could be working for competition. With your parents, it's a small house. Imagine how India works. There's 50 people coming in a house, bell ringing all the time. Electricity shutting off, so your Wi-Fi breaking down, and then you are on a call like this, electricity goes off, right? You're done for 10 minutes, even if you have backup generator, right? Then there are companies globally which are talking about work from home and saying, okay, we'll allow people to work from home, we'll pay for their office, home office, and for the Wi-Fi. Imagine the cost of that. Has anyone actually done an analysis around that? Then you're talking about some companies have come out and said 30% pay reduction, work from home. I can challenge you. I asked 20 people here in my office to say, can you take 30% pay reduction and work from home? They say, no, we want to come to office, we want to spend on the car, we want to spend on the fuel, we want to come to the office and go out and have lunch downstairs, right? So no, it's not easy. And there was a Gensler study recently, which actually it was a US study, and I think a number of interesting things in there. But one of the things that it did say is that overwhelmingly 70% of the respondents said that they would like some flexibility, but not a total work from home. And in the lockdown period, and this is 70% of the respondents said lockdown period, they felt disconnected from the company and they felt less productive. Even if they might be productive, they felt less productive and less satisfied. And that is the key thing, right? So there's, I think, lots of dynamics, and what we saw in the past 2 or 3 months is strong first reactions from lots of companies to say, okay, we'll do work from home, 100% work from home, we want to save cost here, etc., etc., etc. And even with our clients, we saw a lot of flip-flops to say, okay, we're going to work from home, just give up the office space, etc. But when it came to brass tacks to say, okay, give that to us in writing so that we can actually go and start talking to developers, I'm telling you, 9 out of 10 people backed out. And in fact, some of the projects which got put on hold in the last couple of weeks have revived.
Yeah, I think Anshul.
Sorry.
Yeah, Anshul's raising a really good point. So we did a survey ourselves at Cushman and Wakefield, and we called it Experience at Home. And we also issued it to a number of our clients. We had about 40,000 respondents, and Anshul's hit the mark on the head. So the Gensler report showing the same outcome. While we have engagement that's holding at a similar level to pre the work from home, situation, the younger population, so Generation Z and millennials, and they're all saying they want to be back in the office. They miss the social bonding. Home isn't a great place for them to focus. They're in small places. It doesn't work. Ultimately, the connection is really important to most workers. And so while they like the flexibility, and I think most companies will modify that flexible work policy, and that may help them rationalize a little bit of real estate, the reality is the best collaboration and the best results still come as teams are forming and working together at the right time. So, our results are saying there's not going to be a major wholesale shift. You've got to keep the teams working together to get the most out of them.
Yeah, and Tushar, I would say those who are arguing that the productivity was same in the last 3 months, my answer to them is that when it's recession and you know that your job is at stake, right? Wherever you're working overtime to make sure that people know that you are important and the work you're doing, right? When the market is good, I'm sitting at home, I say, okay, and there's sports on TV, which there's live sports on TV, there's totally, and, you distractions also, whole different ballgame.
I think valid point, Chris. I think Anshul has said very rightly, but Anshul, I was talking to Diego. He's a exponential growth catalyst, and I was having one session with him. He told me that, Tushar, earlier offices was connect and the mobility. So mobility first and connect later. Today, the mobility has gone out of the picture. It is only about connect. Connect through digital, connect through physical. I don't know. And the word will be in between somewhere. Means like virtual or physical. And what will be different? I think, and one interesting Starbucks case study has come in picture now. So Starbucks was like, a place between home and office. And today they say that this is not the same. Now today is a pickup point. You can pick up and just go. So I think, what is changing fast. And Anshul, very interesting question is coming from your competition. Piyush Jain, CBRE, he is asking, while the family time during COVID time have been meaningful and full of self-discovery, but according to you, what would be the catalyst to bounce back, and which sector would be on your radar from a 3, 5, 10 years of horizon?
I should tell Piyush the sectors I really don't believe would be would work, right? Because I wouldn't have him go after the same sectors. But really, given that this is a different agenda, so I think the sectors that would obviously the technology sector, right? So what India is seeing is anything to do with AI development, data security, cloud computing, all those sectors are going to do well. Pharma is going to do well. As I just outlaid the whole thing from a BPO outsourcing perspective, given the additional cost advantage, I think that would do well. I actually think the fintech and fintech will do exceptionally well. Health tech, no doubt about that. It's a no-brainer. So I think there'll be tremendous opportunities out there once people shake off this fear of the unknown.
Chris, any point of view from your side?
Well, it's very much the same. You look at there's always the handful of companies that benefit in the crisis, and there's always some that really suffer. Obviously, the big costly capital goods are the ones that are hurting the most. But if you start taking the e-tailers, and you take all the tech-related companies, there's many of them who are seeing growth during this time, and I think everybody's going to adapt, right? So there's going to be learnings for all companies, and they're going to adjust their strategies and adjust some of their ways. And so, the hope is that the health recovers soon enough for business to recover. I think at the end of the day, that's what's really going to drive the long-term effect on various sectors, is how long does it stay? How big is the second bounce? What does it do? And the United States is one of the biggest risks.
Yep. So one thing on a lighter note, Anshul, there is a word called IPC. I am an international property consultant, and some people, poor people, say I'm a broker. The word, we understand the difference, but in your real sense, what is the difference between IPC and a broker? And any tips for become a great broker or best broker? I think anything to say?
So 25 years ago, when I was joining Richard Ellis, and I told my family that my parents that it's a real estate services company, their answer was broker banoge kya?
Sophisticated term for the broker, huh?
Yeah, so they were really upset that Anshul's going to become a broker. But I think, to be honest, broker continued to be a bad term for a while, and I think what I've seen in the last decade in the tens in India is the word broker actually getting accepted and becoming more fancy. And if you look at most developed markets, they pride themselves by calling they're a broker, right? Because it's a very respectable job. The kind of work that you're doing is no more just introducing parties or showing space, but as I explained before, it's the whole gamut of even if you're a leasing agent, you're thinking about projects, you're thinking about FM and how the whole world comes together, how the building is used, what are the technical specifications of the building, does it suit, what's the flow loading, what's the electricity power connection. So there's plenty of things, and how would the lease look like. So at the end of the day, I think the skill set that a successful broker needs today is a much more holistic real estate skill set. And I think that is and that's how our market has been maturing, because the clients have demanded this. The good brokers in the market have gone up the value chain in terms of what advice they're giving. And therefore, the broker word's becoming more acceptable, because they're saying, okay, we are doing some real value added work here, rather than just making an introduction with the phone in hand and stuff, right? So I think that's how the skill set has improved, and I would say it's a great career prospect for everyone now.
Chris, what is your point of view? How people differentiate between IPC and a broker in Singapore? In your word.
Yep, it's very similar. Interesting. Singapore's had a lot more regulation, so they even restrict the number of licenses for brokers, and so each company only has a certain number of them, and that's been a form of government control for both quality, registration, and other elements of it. Each market's a little bit different. I think as an IPC, what we have is the ability to transfer knowledge around the globe, right, and keep elevating the level of professionalism, elevating the training and capabilities, learning from one market to the other, and that then feeds into the folks who are the actual brokers. I mean, we've got brokers in our organization, and our goal is to get them as advisory capable and have as much analytical capability as well as the kind of skills to match people up and help close a deal on behalf of both parties. So I think, as Anshul said, in many markets it's got a strong and positive reputation, and as India continues its journey and getting more regulation over it's just going to match the others. But I think one of the IPC advantages is bringing that type of culture and training to the team to provide the same professional service you'll get in other more mature markets.
Yeah. So, Anshul, as I again refer the Bill Joss conversation that managing all stakeholders in a same balanced manner is very important for any leader. So, do you think like as a IPC services provider, do we do the right justice with the balance between balance between occupier and developer? The both the parties are paying to you, or both the parties are somehow inclined, but do we really do justify our services when we are balancing between both?
Yeah, absolutely. I think at the end of the day, it's client servicing, and the question is who is your client at the end of the day, right? So whoever you are representing, you need to be honest towards that client at that point in time. Of course, you're creating value for the other side, but as long as the deal is honest, I think and that's the role that we have. That the client, whoever that is, gets the best transaction, and no party feels shortchanged, because what we're trying to create is partnership. We can obviously, we are advisors, but we are in and out, right? But the two parties, being the owner of the space and the occupier, then have to live together for the next 9 years.
Yes.
And I think therefore the key thing is to create that partnership and leave it in good taste, and that's a very important aspect of what we do.
Yeah, I think creating a win-win situation is very important. How you create that, it is your leadership style. And do you see the same balance in your side of world, or do you see any different behavior?
No, it's fundamentally the same. And if you take a strategy of the big IPCs, we want to have the full service capability for that investor or owner of real estate, whether it's the developer, whether it's a big, institutional owner of real estate. And you want to be able to service the spectrum of buying the building, selling the building, leasing the building, fitting it out, managing the building, just as we do on the occupier side, which is the side I'm on. And even large firms like ours or our two major competitors, there's not such a dominant market share that very often you're on both sides of a transaction, and there's so many other services we're providing. So I think when you maintain the professionalism, you use the right disclosure, there's times we will step away if we happen to be on both sides, and there's other times where the client likes the advantage of having both sides understood. So the whole key is maintain that professional integrity, have very clear and transparent disclosure, and be ready to step away in any form of conflict. But the conflicts are very small in the percentage of the volume of work we do.
So again, one journalist is asking, Anshul, please forgive me if I'm asking you tough questions, that will IPC increase their rates and charges more from clients for facility management or for their brokerage services? Because why he's asking, I can just give you a little context, because in most of the time, if you see, the balance is like most of the time developers are paying for the the brokers, not the clients. Now the new trend is setting in the market, and now it is a tough time. It's a crisis time. What kind of behavior you see and going forward?
Yeah, I think our approach continues to be partnership, right? So the last thing we want is to take advantage of the situation and ask for unreasonable fees at the end of the day. Whoever is paying that, right? I mean, of course, if we are creating significant value, there are times when we go to the client and say, hey, we created more than significant value, or it's a much longer term lease than your kind of standard leases, and therefore the fee has to reflect that, and so on and so forth. But that's part of commercial negotiation, right? But I would hate to think that we would want to take an advantage of the client in a situation where it's almost arm twisting, right? Because that kind of behavior doesn't go very long, and we've got to be in this market with our own company reputation and personal reputation for a long time. On the facility management side, what I feel is that particularly on the property side of it, asset management side of it, right? I really feel that India does not appreciate that services, the service which is provided enough, right? And therefore that remains a very low end of the market, and people are really negotiating on smaller and smaller and smaller fee, right? The fees is dropping to sometimes 20 paisa a feet, 15 paisa a feet, right? Yeah. And at the end of the day, that does not leave any room for any of the IPCs to invest, grow, innovate, etc., etc. And it's a very hard battle there, right? So, the clients could argue, you guys innovate, invest, and then we will pay 5 years later, right? And, so there's always that fix. But I really think, and this is not us or anyone trying to take advantage of the market, but I really think that the whole market needs to rethink what does it want from facility management providers, and how much they're willing to pay. Because if you want everybody wants services which an Oberoi or a Taj or another 5-star hotel provides, but nobody is willing to spend that kind of money. It doesn't work like that, and I think that learning needs to go into the market. Otherwise, this market will never mature.
Yeah, it's interesting if I do it from the multinational perspective, where we're similar in what we do at Cushman Wakefield, we're kind of the outsourcing arm as these major multinational corporates outsource the real estate function. So it's got a comparison to the BPOs in some way within India. I'll tell you, the market, the clients drive the price, and because you've got mature competition of the IPCs, there's virtually no opportunity to think that you can lean in and raise price. If anything, we're seeing continuous fee compression over the years, and it's requiring us to have to figure out how to automate, how to lower cost in order to hold the service level. So I think Anshul's hit the nail on the head. We don't see opportunity to raise price. We're trying to figure out how do we protect margin by lowering cost, because there's just so much downward pressure coming from these large companies who are outsourcing.
So Anshul, one more thing, and we'll move to another, audience questions. Then one question is about the safety services. Now, due to COVID, most of the multinationals will be looking for safe services. A lot of apps are coming, a lot of facility services are coming. Do you think that this can compensate your kind of revenue somewhere? Like the safety can become a new product line?
Yeah, no, of course. I think the value, as I said, gets every crisis creates some opportunities, and I think this opportunity is definitely there to I think automate a lot of things, create more touchless, because regardless of whether COVID is there or not, I think the infection goes through the year, different viruses and so on and so forth, right? So I think I'm pretty happy that most of the corporates and most of the developers, owners have taken confidence in the fact. And I think we're going to see a lot more touchless type technologies getting integrated into buildings and enhanced. And I think already multinationals and the leading institutions were focusing a lot on physical safety of people. And I think this particular element will add, of course, the health and well-being. And that will be a core focus. So yes, absolutely, that is the services that one could offer.
Yeah, I think there's an interesting dilemma that's being created at the same time, which is the risk and the liability. And so, just as we did a lot of work as a company trying to help clients prepare to come back and got a little bit ahead of the curve, we're now working with law firms around the world assessing the risk, because questions are being asked now, well, what do I do? Who's liable if somebody gets sick in my space and it's from somebody else in a building? And so what's the role that we have as a service provider versus the obligation of a landlord? And so there's a new emerging complexity around risk and liability. And so while it's an opportunity on one hand, there's a lot of issues that haven't been thought through to see where do those lines end up? And obviously, depending on which country, they have various levels of litigation. The U.S. is terrible. Australia will be very, very difficult. So other markets become a real challenge for us to solve. So more to learn in this particular area.
Yeah. So Anshul, thank you, Chris. One very tough question is coming from Economic Times, and Kailash Babbar is here in the room. So he's asking the cabinet minister like Piyush Goyal and corporate honkos like Deepak Parekh advise real estate developers to reduce prices. What are your views on the same? Do you agree with this, Anshul?
I think it's a Bombay versus rest of the India question, and I'll probably answer the rest of the India
there
question.
There was a news like 20% prices are down in Bombay. I think some developer, Hiranandani, has already announced.
Yeah. So I think I'll answer, look, how the developers choose to sell or not is their business, right? And everybody's got their own price points and business models. So I wouldn't quite comment on that. The only thing I would say at a 30,000 feet level is, if I'm a home buyer, will I find a better time to buy, right? If I've been sitting on the fence, Will I find a better time to buy in the foreseeable future? Probably not, right? Think about it, Tushar. The prices pre-COVID were below 2012 prices, right? So you have an 8-year advantage. Now, all of you on this call and otherwise have been, how much more are you earning in 29, or were you earning pre-COVID compared to 2012? Think about that, right? The costs which are going into, forget the land cost, okay, we can say land costs were inflated, right? But the cement cost, the steel cost, other raw material input costs, labor cost, everything has been increasing. The cost of construction has been increasing, right? Yep. Of course, you're forced by the market to do more and more value engineering so that you can keep your costs down, right? But at the end of the day, you have pre-COVID prices, 2019, less than 2012 prices. Your costs have gone up. Your mortgage rate today is down to a historic low of 7% or whatever, and maybe if you have good credit score, even under that, right? How much more do you want this to kind of collapse, right? And ultimately, and I can tell you, the buyer behavior is, as soon as the person buys, his wish is the price increases because I bought, right? So ultimately, I think there's got to, mentally people got to think about whether this is a good time to buy. And I'm telling you, I'm a buyer in this market, right? Because I know that I can strike a deal, and as long as the deal is rational, I think things will happen. Now, whether what Mr. Goyal says or Mr. Parekh says, they're very accomplished people. I don't even want to comment on that. But it's up to individual developers as to what they think their individual situation is, right? Whether they can cut and sell inventory or not. I can't really comment on that.
And like another question is coming from one journalist like Naveen Kumar. Due to prolonged economic slowdown, will be the residential? It is again not the same question we have asked first. Do you think like slowdown, will the residential real estate prices in India fall in near future?
Yeah,
Yes,
I think I just answered that question. I think residential prices are already very low. Now, people might get deals here or there, but it's a good time to buy. Can anyone answer whether the stock market tomorrow would be 30,000, it goes at 33,000, whether it could be 25,000, could be 20,000? The answer is no. The point is, you can never catch the bottom of the market. If you think you want to buy at the bottommost of the market, you're the smartest, you're not, I'm sorry, right? Yeah. So I think that's my general message to people who want to buy residential. But this is as good a time to buy as in. And I don't think this opportunity will come again in the next 5-10 years.
And if you get this opportunity, please let me know. I would like to buy at the bottom.
At the bottommost, yeah. There are lots of us there.
So Chris, do you find these kind of questions in Singapore also? People also look for that opportunities that, when I think, we do see in the share market, but not in the real estate. I think real estate is more to do with the investment incentive or I think that the behavior is different.
Well, I think, when you open up your workplace trends in Singapore and you start your series there, I think you'll find the questions really similar. And the same questions on policy, very similar, and the same dynamics of people. So I think that's something where the markets, while they may be in different stages of rising or falling, but those fundamental questions are asked virtually everywhere.
Yeah. So just to add, Chris, we are starting in Singapore very soon, and we are starting a workplace insider kind of newsletter very soon. You will see in your mailbox. But last question, Ashwini is asking from Workplace Insider that we can also ask Anshul that if he can throw some light on the impact of work from home on office space and consequently on the real estate investment trust REITs, which typically invest only in commercial real estate. So Anshul would like to.
So I think I answered that question in huge amount of detail, and I think that is pretty much valid for all commercial owners, whether it's REIT owned or institutional owned privately or individually owned. In a nutshell, I'm extremely bullish about the office sector. There'll always be flips like this, every 5-6 years. That's the nature of industry economy. But will the need for, and in fact, I did say that I actually think this could result in more office space requirement. Once again, the work from home is here to stay. The flexibility that people will offer, combined with the availability of technology, etc., to people, is going to increase. But my hunch is it'll be available to between 10 to 20% of the people, as in 10 to 20% of the man hours at best. It'll reduce some staff coming into office, but I think the social distancing, and as you rightly said, Tushar, all these are avenue to connect and collaborate. The connecting and collaborating space in offices will ultimately increase, and you need a home, right? I mean, ultimately, please remember that man is a social animal. I learned that in, I think, biology 101 when we started the biology chapter. I think back in grade 5, grade 6, right? It's an inherent need for people to connect with people, and even millennials, by various survey, are saying they, who are constantly on the gadgets, they miss the connection. So, so I think people who are announcing the demise of offices are, have reacted too quickly. And I really think that office space will do extremely well going forward. I think there will be a lot more innovative designs coming in, a lot more innovative thought process coming in as to how the office will be used. And ultimately, remember, I joined a company because of their office space, and I think a lot of people actually get impressed by a company. That's your first gateway. So yeah, and so whether it's REITs or other players, I think we are in good place.
I think you have already covered everything, Anshul, but one question I want to just throw to both of you, which yesterday my coach thrown to me, that, if you look at last 20 years of behavior in office fit-out industry, so I'll just, before I go to office fit-out industry, I just would like to give you, some aspect that if you see the first drive, the kind of storage drive, which was carried in a truck for 500, bytes. But today, if you see, there is a, the nail size of, a hard drive can take, kind of many gigabytes. If you see the energy price, the battery prices has changed, sizes has changed. The mobile, which is carrying everything has changed like last 20 years of span. But if I see the office space, Anshul, it's a very interesting fact. When I joined this industry in 2006, when I joined DLF, the time was 65, the 3 months time, or maybe 2.5 months time. The prices were always 1,800, 2,000 rupees. The behavior was the same. The client and the architect interaction was the same. PMC's role was the same. Nothing has changed in the last 15 years. Nothing has changed at all. I am just giving and throwing this question to every audience. And I will be doing crowdsourcing also on this idea. Why this industry has not changed as yet? Do you have any idea how can it be changed?
I think there are too many vested interests.
Yeah.
When there are too many vested interests, people hate to let any change happen, and we see that on a daily basis, right? Yeah. But ultimately, and number one, and number two, I think if you look at the money spent on the technology industry, on the real estate technology, and I think my boss Matt has a wonderful slide where the money spent on technology in various industries are on the top right. So high utilization and lots of money spent, in billions of dollars. Real estate is, I think, the last, or the industry which has received least amount of investment for technology, and that's changing now. So, come last couple of years, a lot more money has kind of flown into real estate technology, and I think that is probably going to drive changes in the next 5 years, or maybe it may be sooner. Is how I view it. Chris, your views?
Yeah, it is an interesting question, right? So maybe the total amount of space and when you look at the costs and the amount per head hasn't changed that much. But when you actually look at the design of space, it is changing quite a bit. And it is for that whole collaborative nature. And I think the whole concept of, as you get better technology, and so you can know exactly where you want to sit, and you have a whole different experiences. The buildings are designed to be smarter buildings using technology. I think you'll see the evolution. I don't think at the end of the day, people don't change their physical size. So the number of people do drive the space requirements. That's why I think some of the fundamentals seem the same. But I really do think the nature of space, the collaborative nature and technology is what's starting to make the biggest impact now.
So what I gauged out of both of the statement that the recipe taste is changing, but the kitchen is not changing. So the point how when we change the kitchen, I think the scale of the recipe and preparation and everything will change. And I think I'm throwing this question to everyone in the audience: how can this industry be changed? How can the behavior or the time which client spend with the architect or architect spend with the contractor or maybe with the builder? I think if somebody think very in right direction, and I think prop tech is the one thing, Anshul, I totally agree with you, which will help us to change this whole dynamics. Before we conclude, Anshul, I would like to ask any one advice you would like to give to your people, those who are listening to you, to manage this crisis and passing through this crisis.
I think the only thing I'd say is just keep moving forward, and that's what I've done through various crises or otherwise, right? I think it's important to keep history in mind. You learn from history and you apply that for future, but really to brood about what could have been better, etc., or had this happened, this would have been, I think it's pointless, and I think you've got to assess yourself every now and then and say, so what's next for me?
I think it's a case of stay really honest with your people, really hear what they're saying, make the decisions based on the best information you have, and the decisions don't have to be long term. Work your way through the crisis. Nobody's predicting the end, so think in increments of what do I need to do for the next couple of months? How do I anticipate scenarios beyond that so I'm ready to act if in fact it moves one way or the other in the scenario? But keeping that really honest, open communication, listening to people is really key, and then planning ahead in the distance that you can see so you can move as quickly as possible.
So, Chris, one question is coming from Narendra Makasir, that he's asking any book you would like to recommend to people in this time to read?
Oh, wow. I'm not a huge book reader, but any of the Marvel movies is what I've done to relax through it. But I'm not an avid book reader, so I tend to catch my information and all the snippets of news. So maybe I'm more of a Gen Z person than a baby boomer. So I can't help you on that one.
Anshul, any book recommendation?
Yeah, one of the books that's really impressed me recently is a book called, and it's my current favorite, is a book called The Magician of Lhasa. And it kind of beautifully, it's a thriller, so it's very exciting. Only about 300 pages, you go through it real quick. And it actually compares, it basically connects a quantum physics, quantum physics to Buddhism, right? And it talks a lot about philosophies of life, obviously around Buddhism, which is happiness and so on and so forth. But it's a thriller, and it's so beautifully written that for people who just want to enjoy it as a thriller, it's fantastic, and you will take a few teachings of the Dalai Lama from that, and it's a wonderful book. Called The Magician of Lhasa.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Anshul and Chris, for such wonderful insights and taking out time to be here today. We are so grateful and we look forward to seeing you again in future. Thank you to our audience at home. We hope you are safe and enjoyed the session. Thank you, everyone. Stay tuned. We have bring together several leaders to share their journeys with you. The next good session is coming on 24th evening. Mr. Diago is an exponential growth catalyst, and he's an amazing guy. Would request everyone to join this session on 24th, but it is only invite session. Diago will select the audience, so you can show your interest, but Diago will finally decide who should be in the room. So please show your interest, and thank you for coming here. And Chris, for you, we are coming to Singapore. Just let's wait and connect here. Okay?
I'm looking forward to it. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.